No means does it have to be perfect at this stage. I'm just introducing you to the scale so you can get a gist of how to play it. Once you've done that, you're going to do the exact same thing on your left hand. Okay, so you're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when you're playing right hand or left hand, just make a mental note of what finger is playing the sharp or flat. So, with G major on the right hand, it's going to be 4 on the right hand. And that will be one of your checkpoints. For the left hand, it's going to be your number 2. So, right there. So to recap your process as we move through each scale, you're going to identify the key signature. Make sure you're replacing the natural versions, not adding to them. Okay, so you only have 8 notes total. You play the right fingerings slowly until you can comfortably play the scale at a steady pace. Okay, go as slow as you need to. And then step 3 is to play the left hand once you're done with the right hand. So we're doing that process for each scale. Okay, that's G major. Now the next one we're doing, D major. The key signature for D major is F sharp and C sharp. Again, you don't have to commit this to memory right now, but it is obviously very helpful if you do. I know that anytime I would normally play F or C, I'm making those sharps. So I'm playing the right pattern because I'm on the right hand. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. I'm making that mental note. Okay, what finger am I playing these sharps on? On the 3, okay. On the 4, same. Okay, your ascending scale and your descending scale should look exactly the same in terms of fingering. Your left hand, that's what that looks like. Now, it's very natural for your left hand to be weaker than your right. That's because most of us are right-handed. So your left hand might take a bit more time than your right hand, but just give them both equal patience and try not to rush through things, because a great quote by an incredible pianist goes by, so somebody asked him, how do you play every single note correctly? And he answered with, because I only practiced the right notes. Now it sounds obviously like, okay, yeah, sure, it's obvious that just don't mess up. As I'm telling you, go so slowly that you can't make a mistake. And if you do make a mistake, of course, that's fine. Don't, hold it against yourself. Set yourself up for success, that you can play it easier. Don't just try and go on the first try, on the right hand or left hand. Okay, so pause the video now and have a go at playing D major until you can do it with some comfort. It doesn't have to be perfect right now, just so you can get the gist of it. Now, the last scale we're doing together is A major. Notice that these are all major scales so far. And the key signature to A major is F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So, these are the sharps we're playing. Again, don't call them flats. If I play A to A, replacing the natural versions of those keys with the sharps, this is what I get. I'm using the same pattern of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm making that mental note of what finger I'm playing these sharps with. 3, 3, 4, 4, 3, 3. So again, you're not changing any of the fingering when you're going up versus down. The exact same thing, just the other way. Left hand. Now, I do not by any means expect you to be able to play A major at that standard right away. In fact, that's the level which I would ask you to aim for, but take it slow. So you can go. And then back down. Now see there, I'm keeping that steady pace. It's very, very important. Pace, this pulse, this beat that you're playing to. It's so important that you are able to stick to it as a musician. So if you can play all the notes correctly at a good pace while still, relaxing your shoulder, relaxing your elbow and your wrist with good form, that is more than a pass and you're doing great. Because naturally, even unconsciously, you're going to be playing these things faster now that you have the mind-muscle connection. Your fingers are improving. I want to give you a couple tips that's going to help, because now that I'm giving you a couple more things to practice, it is easier to feel frustrated when you're making mistakes. It's easier to just say, no, I can't do this, I quit, that's it. It is easy to say those things. And everybody is going to have these thoughts at some point, no matter what you're doing. Scales, pieces, anything, like not even just music, any other thing. You're gonna sometimes experience that thought from time to time. The thing is that you want to set yourself up in a way that you're not experiencing that all the time. Because if you just off the bat just start playing with two hands really fast, and you expect yourself to actually play it properly, of course it's not gonna work. So take it step by step. Go right hand first. Go very slowly. Even at the beginning, you don't have to go to any beat. At the beginning, just focus on getting the right notes. Focus on playing it with the right finger. Go so slowly. Truly. Take your time with this. And before you know it, you're playing something like, two-handed A major scale, one octave up and down, really smoothly, to a pace. It's all great. You have no idea how much that's going to help you in literally everything that's coming down the line. For me, who knows everything that you're going to be learning, everything that you're going to even want to learn, the things that you don't even know are options, trust me when I say that if you just spend a little time getting good at these things I'm giving you, it's going to help you out so much in the long run. So that's your task, to play all of these new scales along with your C major for both hands separately. So to quickly run through them all with you, this is what they all sound like with their key signature. So, C major, no key signature. Go slow as you want, as long as you're consistent with a good pace. G major, key signature of F sharp. Remember, when you're playing, try not to lift your fingers up in the air too much. Like that. Keep it relaxed. So G major has 1 sharp. D major has F sharp and C sharp, so 2 sharps. Now, 3 sharps, A major, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. You don't have to play it at this octave, you can go up here, doesn't matter. Give your left hand equal amount of time as well. Because you want your left hand to be developing with your right hand. Just like if you go to a gym and say you want to work on your arms, but if you don't work on your legs, it's going to be disproportionate. So that's your task, and only move on to the next lesson once you are comfortable doing those. Your extension task, if you really want a challenge, is to do one of these scales 2 hands at a time. Start with the easier one of G major and go very, very slowly. Because you have to get used to the different patterns that you're using. Only do this if you are very confident with the previous task though. Don't just jump to this. Okay, great job this lesson, and I'll see you soon. All right, welcome back everybody. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to play a really nice melody and harmony. Just this little exercise that I've composed for you that will match the level that you're at. It sounds really nice, it's very fun to play, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge because it's going to let you grow. It's going to apply some of the things that you've been learning, rhythms, scales, arpeggios, all that stuff. I'm very soon going to be giving you the formula that's going to allow you to create any scale. And that formula is going to be hugely, hugely useful for you, even more than the formula for all chords. But I know I've been giving you a lot of information and you've been learning a lot. So a bit of a break here of explaining, and we're going to be doing more playing together. And like I said, this one's going to be applying a lot of information. So I'm just going to demo it for you, what it's going to look like by the end. So. And then it's going to repeat. So you can probably see a couple elements here that you might already know. You can see that we're playing a scale. That scale is A minor. And you would know that because we're starting on A, and we're obviously not playing any sharps or flats. And again, A minor and C major are the only two scales that don't have a key signature. You might have also noticed that we're doing a chord progression, which I touched on a bit when we did our Hallelujah case study. And that is simply repeating 4 chords that go in a certain order. So in this case, it's now, if your piano does not go down that low, you can just do it with one hand. Or you can move it up an octave. Whatever works for you. You're playing that with 1, 3, 2, and 4, leaving your hand in the same position. That's if you're going to play with one hand. Now, if your piano does go down this low, then use the octave version. You may have noticed that I said chords, but I'm not actually playing those 3-fingered chords. I'm playing an octave chord. Well, here's the difference. A chord can have multiple variations, as we saw with inversions, but in terms of the terminology, a triad is when you're playing the 1-3-5 structure, or 5-3-1 depending on the hand. So if you're playing left hand, 5-3-1, this would be called a triad. And you can remember this as tri from triangle because there's 3 notes. You can see we're playing them at equal intervals. So it's play note, skip 1, play note, skip 1, play note. But what we're going to be playing is just that octave version. So with the 5 and the 1. So this is what your left hand is going to be doing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. So you can memorize it by the pattern. So you're going from A down by 2, up by 1, down by 2 again. You should obviously be aware of what note you're actually playing. So A, F, G, and E. That's the chord progression we're going with today. Now, your right hand is playing the A minor scale. Which hopefully should not be a big challenge to play if you practice the things I said last lesson. But just remember you're doing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, I know I've been saying this a lot about the fingering, exactly what you're doing. I know I've been repeating it a lot to the point you may have been sick of hearing it. But it's so important that this is something you're comfortable doing because your focus should not be on the fingering. Your focus should be on staying in time, should be on the right notes. It's most ideal that you are comfortable enough eventually that you can do it by muscle memory. So in our song, we're playing that twice. So we're playing the scale up and down once, and then we move to F, and then you play a second time. Now, obviously, don't go this fast. I'm just demonstrating. Now, the second part of the song, you're playing 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So you're just going up. You're not going back down, you're just going up. So, like that. None of this. Because that's going to throw your counting off, which I'm going to explain. So that's with the G. And then, this is the tricky part, you go to E, and as soon as you play it, you play 1 with the G sharp. And you can see I'm playing these notes. The G sharp or A flat, the B, the D, and the E. Now if you're more visual, you might look at it like this. You look at the notes what you're playing, so the B, C, D, E with the G. Now you don't move anything, you're just no longer playing the C. You're replacing it with that A flat. And you're going to tuck your fingers in slightly to be able to play it comfortably. And that would go with the E. And then we go back to A. So, the last thing you need to be aware of before we start practicing this step by step is how you're going to be counting. We're no longer counting in 1, 2, 3, 4. We're actually going to do a variation of it, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you're saying and after each beat that passes. Remember to add an and after the 4 as well, because sometimes people say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and, but that will be wrong because we're basically splitting the beat in half, and the last beat is still a beat, so you also have to remember to split that in half. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, repeats like that. So that's how we're counting. I'm going to be snapping to the main actual beat, so it's my snapping will be still on the 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm also going to be aiding you with that and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So our first step that we're going to practice is playing the A minor scale in time. So this is how it's going to be. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you're holding that last A for 2 of these half beats. So you're saying 4 and, rather than 4. Okay, you're leaving it 4 and. So to demonstrate a little bit faster, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now the only tricky part here in terms of that scale and the counting is this last bit over here. So watch very carefully what beat I'm saying with which note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 1. So this G will be both 4 and it's also going to be the 1. So the primary beat. It's with the snap. Make sure you're not playing 1 on the A. This top A is going to be and. So really quickly again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So pause now and practice that on your own. Just the right hand, stay in time, and count out loud. I'll see you back here in a second. Okay, so hopefully you're comfortable with that. Now, the next small step we're going to be practicing is our left hand. We're going to be holding this for 4 beats, and then 4 beats again, for a total of 8 beats. So to show you, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you're counting till 4 twice, and then you move to the next chord. There's not that much to practice here, because if you're keeping your shoulder, elbow, and wrist relaxed while you're playing this, you're not going to have that much trouble. Besides, maybe if your fingers are a little bit shorter and you find it difficult to reach all the way to an octave. But in terms of technique, there's not that much going on here. But that's when you're looking and focusing this as you're playing. When you're actually playing both hands at the same time, it becomes a bit more complicated because naturally your focus is going to go to the thing that's most complicated, which in this case will be that A minor scale. So what might happen is that you're playing this and then you go to the wrong note, or you spend too long here finding which note to play. You're delaying the beat, and like we always say, staying on time is very important. So here's an example of what some of my students might do when you're making this mistake. They're focused on the right hand, not anticipating here, and then they stop for a couple seconds and you can see that they're not on time. So for that reason, you should anticipate the move, look at your left hand, and just as a reference, so what you're going to do. So this is going to be what it looks like. I'm going to go very slowly so that I have time to explain what's happening. I'm focusing on my right hand here. And now I know what's happening here, so I don't have to focus so much on my right hand, because I know that all I have to do left is this. So I don't have to think about it much. At this point, I'm no longer looking at my right hand, I'm looking at my left hand, so that I can gauge, okay, where am I moving? 2 steps down. Just as a reference for how much I'm moving my hand. Because if I don't look at my left hand, I might get it wrong. And I go down there. So you really just look at your left hand as a reference, then move back to the more complex thing. Back on my right hand. Left hand. And left hand. Back to right hand. So you can see that there's this decision making that's happening quite fast and you want to do it ahead of time. So for that reason, I created this exercise so that you can develop these anticipation skills, being able to stay on time, putting together melodies and harmonies, scales, arpeggios. So our next small step here is to do a transition from this section to this section. Because if you can do that, the whole song is going to go a lot more smoothly. So you're playing this 4 times, and then I anticipate, move my fingers in to make it easier to play. Also play that 4 times. Then from here back to the A minor. So to recap, you don't at all have to go that fast. I'm just demonstrating what that looks like all put together, at a fast and smooth pace. So pause the video now and practice those elements so that you can become more comfortable playing them. I'll see you back here in a sec. All right, so now we're going to be putting them together. Now we're going to go very slowly here because you should not be rushing at this stage. You're still forming those connections in your brain. So we're going to be building step by step. So we're just going to play the first half of the song. That's it. Now we're going to go slowly. You can either play with me now and I'll count for you, or you can watch first and then go back and play with me, or you can practice on your own, whatever you prefer. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's the first half that we're just practicing. Definitely don't move on to the next half until that first half is comfortable. You don't at all need to go fast, you just have to go steady at a pace that's not too difficult. When you're practicing this on your own, count out loud. That's going to help you a lot. So for the second half, I'm going to go as slowly as you should be practicing. Remember, you're not performing, you are practicing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 then to the A, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So you can see there. So practice slowly and work your way up gradually until you can go at around this pace. And so on. That is your task. Have fun with it. There is no extension task here, except maybe if you want to go a bit faster, but make sure that you're not compromising your steadiness and your time. All right, great job this lesson, and I'll see you soon. Okay, welcome to this lesson, and here I'm going to be explaining how to create any major or minor scale. So we already know how to make any major or minor chord using the 4-3 or 3-4 method, but with scales, this is going to be a lot more useful because, like we already discussed, most of the music that you're going to go and learn has a key signature, which is another way of saying it's in a scale. So for you to instantly become more confident in learning and practicing that piece, you should know the scale. But there are loads and loads and loads of scales. Normally in traditional lessons, you would just be memorizing how to do it. So you just memorize that is D major, and you play it with those two black notes. There's not really any system to follow there. There's no theory being involved. And when they go to learn pieces, yes, because they know that scale off by heart, it is going to be much easier to learn and play that song. But the only issue is getting to that point of memorizing all those scales, because it takes a very long time. So alternatively, there's a formula in music theory that you can use to create any scale, no matter if it's the first time you play it or the 100th time you play it. So I'm just going to give it to you right now. To create any major scale, you need to follow TTS, TTTS. The T and S's stand for tone and semitone. So to demonstrate that this works, we're going to take C major, a scale that we already know how it sounds like. If this system works and we follow it, we should get that scale, note for note. So TTS, TTTS. You do not count the first note. You don't count the root that you're starting at. So this will be 0. I'm going to count a tone. So D. Because this C sharp, that would be a semitone. So C, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So a bit faster, I'll go to my root note, whatever the name of the scale is that I'm trying to make. C. Okay. T, T, S, T, 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 S. So you can see that works. We'll do one more very quickly. We'll do A major. I'm going to A, and let's figure out how you play it. T, T, S, T, 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 S. So all together, you don't even have to play it with the fingering. If you're just trying to figure out the notes, then you can just play it like that. Now, if you're ever stuck on where to make the tone jump and where to make the semitone jump, just remember that 2 semitones is 1 tone. So for example, we want to make the A major scale, start on A. That's 0. Tone. Why is this a tone? Because this is 1 semitone, that's another semitone. So far we made 2 semitone jumps, which means 1 tone. So from A to B is tone. So T, T, so from B, this is one semitone, another semitone. So that's a tone. A, T, T, S, T, T, because there's two semitones here, T, two semitones here, S. So now we know that this strategy actually works. There is a system to this. Now let's introduce the minor formula. It's T, S, T, T, S, T, T. So I should have it on screen for you now, and let's check this through. So let's take A minor, which we already know how it's supposed to sound. We're not playing any sharps or flats here, and we know that's our goal, so let's apply this and double check that it works. So it's T, S, T, T, S, T, T. We go to A. T, S, T, T, S, T, T. Let's take a much more complex sounding scale. Let's go for C sharp minor. Okay, start on C sharp. Exactly the same principle. T, S, T, T, S, T, T. So all together, that would be the C sharp minor scale. You have no idea how much time this is going to save you. This method is going to be very useful in three major occasions. The first is when you're trying to practice a new scale and you want to find out what the notes are. You can use this. The second is when you're learning a song, when you're reading the sheet music, you're going to see that it's in a certain scale, and by being good at the scale, you're going to automatically get much better at the actual piece, because now your fingers know, okay, these are the notes I can play, and anything else is not in that scale. So that takes your mind off of so much options, because now you're limited in your parameters. And the third biggest occasion that you're going to be using this for is when you're improvising or composing, because once you've decided on a scale, it's going to be very easy to improvise from there. But we'll talk more about that in that module. Now, by no means am I telling you don't practice scales anymore. Yes, of course, if you did apply this and you just figured out what the scale looked like, it's going to benefit you. But there are so many benefits to actually practicing the scale itself. You have better independent finger strength, which is a huge, huge deal, because that's going to allow you to play the more complex, more beautiful sounding rhythms and melodies a lot easier. Your fingers are already used to moving in a certain pattern. They're already used to making these transitions with the thumb going underneath and then continuing. These are things you come across a lot. And once you have developed the muscle memory to do that, playing them in actual songs or improvising makes it a lot easier. Everything goes a lot smoother. It's also a really great warm-up. By actually playing and passively memorizing how to do it, you're building very slowly a bank of scales that you become quite confident in, and that is going to serve you very, very well. So, although you can use this technique to just create any scale, don't just like neglect actually practicing it, okay? Because I know that is very tempting, but trust me, you don't want to just skip out on this. So we're going to do an exercise here where I'm going to name you a scale and you're going to create it and play it. That's going to kind of help you set this in stone into your mind about how this works and how universally applicable this is. I'm going to do a quick example of what we're going to be doing together. I will name a scale like B flat major. So what you're going to do is go to B flat and you're going to apply the correct formula to make the right tonality of the scale. So I'm not asking for B flat minor, I'm asking for B flat major. So you're going to be doing TTS, TTTS. If you want to remember these formulas more easily, I personally memorize better through sound. So for me, it helps when I think of it like TTS, TTTS. And then for minor, T, STT, STT. That's how I remember it. But you can also do it just by visual. Like you can picture the pattern itself in your mind and see how it's laid out. So for example, with a minor especially, you just have a T at the beginning, and then it's STT, STT. It just repeats in a very easy way to remember. So for B flat major, we're doing a major scale, so you're going to apply the major formula. We're going to go to B, T, T, S, T, 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 S. Then you're going to play that with the correct fingering. So right hand is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then come back down if you can. So I want you to try constructing and playing E major scale. Pause the video now, have a go, and then unpause when you're ready. Okay, so E major, we'll go to E. We're using TTS, TTTS. T, T, S, T, 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 S. We'll do one more, and then I'm going to give you your tasks. So I want you to make an E flat major scale. Pause the video now, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so E flat major. That's what that sounds like. So hopefully you got some of that right, and if you didn't, that's fine. It just comes down to practicing this process more. But just in case it was a small mistake that led to everything else being wrong, remember that the first note you start on, you do not count it, so that you can count that as 0. So if you're making a B flat major scale, B flat, call that 0. Then T, that would be the T. And the other thing, remember that 2 semitones is 1 tone, and make sure you're counting carefully. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Your tasks are basically a list of some scales I'm going to give you, specifically ones that you haven't practiced that much from the other lesson, and you're just going to be constructing and playing them with your right hand and your left hand separately. Your extension, and this is going to be really an extension, I would avoid practicing this unless you're very, very confident with the right hand and left hand separately. But I'm going to give you the following compulsory scales to play right hand and left hand separately. So you're doing G minor, E minor, C sharp major, and B major. I'm not going to play them because I want you to actually construct them. I don't want you to just copy from what I'm doing. So if you follow that formula, and obviously making sure you have actually 8 notes in the scale, then you should be fine. Practice it slowly, one hand at a time, and your extension is to do that both hands at a time. Now this is going to be a huge step for like 99% of people, because some of these are going to be more complex scales, and playing them two-handedly takes a bit more time than the easier scales that we started off with. So don't feel like you have to do that. Make sure you're not moving on to the next lesson until your primary tasks are done. Okay, good luck, and I'll see you soon. Okay, welcome everybody to this lesson. I'm just going to be explaining how to use the metronome and how you can practice using this. So a metronome is a tool that will help you stay in time by doing the counting for you so that you can focus on what you're actually playing rather than trying to count it out loud. To practice going at an even pace, and you can actually set it to go slower or faster depending on your needs. So I've literally just typed into Google here metronome, and you can see this pops up. You can do this yourself. So here we have our BPM, and this is basically how fast we're doing it. So you can see it's just going to be this beat that repeats at the certain BPM that you've set. Now if you go higher, of course going to go higher, and the same with slower. Now you have this entire range to work with, and this is a very, very simple metronome. You don't have much controls, and when you're just starting out, this is more than enough. All you need really is something to keep you in time. But let's say that we went to this website, and we can see that we've still got our similar BPM range. But here we also have some Italian words which describe roughly how fast you're going. And this is there because when you start to read sheet music, you will have these instead of your BPMs when you're learning classical stuff. When you're reading sheet music of more modern songs, usually the composer or whoever actually wrote the sheet music will have the BPM set rather than simply the Italian. The reason the Italian is here is because back then they did not measure things in BPM because that didn't really exist, so they measured it based on these words. You don't have to pay attention to them so much because we're going to learn those later, but you can see how they change depending on the BPM. So it is obviously nice to get a rough idea of what words mean what. So we're at 90 BPM right now, and there's a couple things that I want you to pay attention to. The first is that we have these two circles, and you can see that the beat is going through these and repeating. Now the other thing is that this control here will increase how many of these circles you have before it goes back to the beginning. Now we're going to set it to 4. This would be the equivalent of 4 time. So when we normally count in 1, 2, 3, 4, this is how a metronome displays it. Now the only issue so far with this metronome is that you have no idea of when is 1, because obviously it's not counting the numbers. You need some kind of audio cue to tell you when we're back at the beginning of this loop. So that's why you want to have this selection on. And here, you can see it's a lot easier to know when's the first beat. You don't need to pay attention to any of these controls. They just give you subdivisions of the beat. So for example, this one. They give you these smaller beats underneath the main beat. But again, don't worry about these symbols or what they mean, or even actually selecting these controls. You want to stick with this one. You want to have this first beat on, and you usually set it to 4, because most of the songs you're playing are going to be in 4 time. But if you're practicing something in 3 time, you want to put it to 3. So let's say you're practicing scales, and you want to count in 4. You can set it here, and you want to start slow. So let's say you go to 80, and you have the first beat on, and you go. Once you're comfortable playing it at that pace, then you can increase the speed to maybe 86 or eventually 97, or you can go higher and higher to increase your pace and stepping up the challenge each time you get very comfortable. Now metronomes obviously are not just used for scales, they're also for arpeggios, chords, and most commonly used when you're practicing songs. We're going to be reading music soon together, and so much information that you've just been learning is going to be notated on sheet music. They usually have more complex rhythms. It's a good idea to have a metronome on when you're practicing keeping the right pace. Keep in mind, you want to avoid using a metronome when you're still just starting out with a new exercise. If I taught you how to use a metronome at the very start, and I said, practice your scale with this metronome, play it on, and now go ahead. But you've never played scales before, you don't even know what you're doing. Now you have this constant moving beats, that's going to pressure you. So at the beginning of any exercise that you're doing, you want to always get comfortable with the actual technique first, and then once that's down, you can put a metronome on and start very slowly. You can go all the way down if you want, and you can practice it like that. You usually want to keep on this here, where you can stress the first beat, because that gives you a sense of where beat 1 is. But you can take it off if you feel like it's necessary. That's how you use a metronome. If you're using a digital metronome, you can set things like volume. You can have a lot more complex options, more than these things you have here. But again, don't pay attention to that. You want to set it at 4/4, which means 4 time. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
And if you happen to use a keyboard which has a built-in metronome, you can usually just like figure out how to actually turn it on, how to turn it off. It's usually straightforward. Sometimes it's really difficult too, actually, because they don't really give much information. But usually it's the same thing of volume up, volume down, increase the tempo, decrease tempo, stuff like that. Okay, that's pretty much all there is to it, and I will see you in the next lesson.
Welcome back everyone to this lesson, and here I'm going to be showing you some much more advanced chords that you can play to instantly make your playing much more beautiful and have a much richer quality to it. So I'm actually going to be teaching you 4 new concepts here. More full chords, stroke chords, 7th chords, and extended chords. Now it is likely that you have seen 7th chords already, possibly even extended chords, even though you might not know what they are, because they are very commonly used in chordal based songs that you'd go online to follow. Stroke chords are also common there as well, so this lesson is going to help you play those. The reason I did not teach this earlier is because you need to have an understanding of scales to be able to get this concept. So that's why you are learning scales first. So the first thing is more full chords. This does not really have a technical name to it. It's just a more richer version of an original triad chord. So for example, let's say you're asked to play A minor. You might play it like this or like that. Now it sounds good, but you want to make it better. So here are your options. So we have an A, C, and an E to play with. Now in our left hand, we're playing 2 A's. We could have our second finger play this E here. That already gives it some more tone. We could take our original right hand chord, and because we're working with either A, C, or E, I have an E over here that I could work with. So I'm going to move my thumb down here and replace the A with my second finger. So now instead of playing, we can now do something like this. Now that has improved it. There's actually loads of other variations you could do here. So instead of this octave with the E, you can actually play the triad plus the A. So you can see you have the triad chord here, and I'm adding the octave A on top. And then in my right hand, I can do an inversion of the A minor chord. So I'm going to do a first inversion, which if I take the original, A goes up there, I swap. So that's the first inversion, and I'm just moving it down here. So altogether, again, that sounds a lot better than just, because that is a very overused method. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just that if you want more interesting sounds, you have options. You can repeat this process with any other chord and move around these notes more as you please. So very simply, it's the normal triad chord. You take those notes and give them to other fingers where you can. Let's say you're making a chord change here and you're doing A minor to F major. You can do A minor, first inversion F major, and then for each of those, do that fuller version. So you just add the octave note on the end, so. There's an example. Now stroke chords. Now when you see stroke chords, you see the main chord, so for example D major, and then stroke F sharp. So what that means is that you take that first chord name, D major, play that in your right hand, and then in your left hand you play the F sharp. Now this counts as a D major stroke F sharp because I'm literally just playing an F sharp. But what's most ideal is that you just play it with the octave. That's going to be the most common way of doing it. Obviously, that is not just for just the D major and F sharp. You can see that with many other chords. But in terms of the formula for how to actually play it, you take the first chord, you play it in your right hand, then you take the second chord, and you just do an octave in your left. So that would be a D major stroke F sharp. Now, seventh chords. Seventh chords are a bit more complicated, but they sound absolutely amazing. So, for example, we're going to take an F major 7th chord. To create an F major 7th chord, we need to first know what the scale is for F major. So, it's a major scale. We're going to take TTS, TTTS. So we go to F, count that as 0, and we have T, T, S, T, 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 S. If you want to play the scale, this is one of the very rare ones where instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this applies to a very small minority of scales, which F major is one of them. So basically what you do is that you take the 7th note of that scale and you add that to the triad, or the 1, 3, and 5. So we know that this is 1, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm taking 1, 3, and 5. Then I'm going to add the 7. So altogether, it sounds very nice, especially when you kind of roll the notes. Instead of just playing it all at once, like that, you can actually roll them, like that. This would be an F major 7 chord. Now, there's actually another type of 7th chord where it's just F7. It doesn't say F major 7 or F minor 7 or anything like that. It just says F7. What you do there is that you take that 7th note and you flatten it. So you go down by 1 semitone, whatever that note is. So that's going to be this E flat. And that counts as an F7 chord. So here's the exercise. I want you to create a D major 7 chord. What you're going to do is figure out what notes are in the D major scale, so TTS, TTTS, unless you already have the scale memorized. Play the 1st, 3rd, and 5th note of the scale to make the chord, then add the 7th note. Pause the video now, play that, and then come back, and I'll show you what it's supposed to sound like. Alright, to make the D major 7, we have the 1, 3, and 5 of the scale, and I'm playing the 7th. Because D major scale goes, so that's the 7th note. Now, if you find a D7 instead of D major 7, you take the 7th note and you flatten it, which means you go down by 1 semitone. That's your D7 chord. I'm going to give you one more so that you can practice how to do this combination. I want you to make a G major 7 chord and then make a G7 chord. And while you're playing these chords, play the octave for G. And then it's going to sound real nice. So come back when you've done that. So hopefully this is what you have for the G major 7 chord, then the G7 chord, and that's that. Now, finally for extended chords. This builds on the idea of 7th chords, of counting numbers from the scale and adding. I'm going to take A minor because it's going to be easier to demonstrate this. That's our A minor scale. Now, we already know that this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees of the scale. But what if we go beyond this? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're counting this as 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So again, this is 8, and then 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So if you're asked to play an A minor 9, you take your A minor chord, you add the 7, okay, so A minor 7. Then we take the 9th, so this is 8 and then 9. That would be an A minor 9 chord. Sounds very complex. Now what you can actually do here is if you take away the 7th, so you're only left with the triad, and then add this 9, this is an A minor add 9. It's only an A minor 9 when you have the 7th in it. When you take away the 7th, it is literally A minor chord and you're adding the 9th. So it's well named. You're almost never gonna see that level of complexity, but what you will see for sure is the 7th chords, but that's there so that you know how to play these chords if they come up. We're gonna do an exercise so that we can kind of set it in stone here how to make these 9 chords. I would like you to make a D major 9 chord, please. So remember your process step by step, pause the video, and come back when you're ready. So to make the D major 9, we're gonna take our actual triad. Then we're gonna take the 7th note, which is this. I'm gonna move my hands around here so I can play a bit easier. That's our D major 7. Then I'm gonna add the 9. So this is 7, then 8, and then 9. Then this would be a D major 9. If this was gonna be a D major add 9, I remove the 7. With the 7, D major 9. You might have guessed that you can also do, for example, an A9 chord rather than an A major 9 chord. Similarly to how you can have an A major 7 chord, that's different to an A7 chord. So our A major 7, we make our scale, which is, then we take our triad with a 7. That's our A major 7. Now flatten this, you have A7. Now if I add the 9, that's an A9, because there's no major 7th. It's just a normal 7. So that would be A9. Again, that's a very rare chord that you come across. So a quick recap of everything that we did so far. So just to make more full chords, you take the 1, 3, 5, which is your triad. So let's take D major. And I'm just gonna allocate those 3 notes in different places to different fingers, so I can end up with something like, so you can see it's actually just that triad, but kind of thrown all over the place here. Now for stroke chords, if it says A minor slash C, you take A minor and then throw a C on the bottom end. That's A minor slash C. Now for 7th chords. For major 7th chords, you take the 7th note of the major scale and you add it to the triad. So, obviously right hand or left hand. And if you want a minor 7 chord, you do the exact same thing in the minor scale. So D minor, I take the 7th note, so that is D minor 7. To make the D7 chord, we take our major 7th and we go down a semitone on the last note. That is a D7 chord. Now major 7th chords are actually some of the most beautiful things that you could play on the piano, because they have this really nice harmony to it. You can actually mess around with these major 7th chords, minor 7th chords, and you can make something really, really nice. D major 7, and I said play that with an A major 7. So what I'm going to do here is have a bass line. So you can see here my left hand is actually going to be substituting my thumb on my right hand, because that way I have the fingers to mess around with the 7th. D major 7, I can go into A major 7, and then you can mess around with some melodies, keeping within the notes of the scale. And I can go on and on. My point being is that you can actually mess around with these chords rather than just playing it, once, waiting, and then coming to the A major 7. So don't worry about mistakes. We're going to go through this process more in the improvisation section, but have fun with it. All right, that's everything for this lesson. I hope you found this very helpful. Your task is just very simply to mess around with these 7th chords, maybe even 9th chords on some other starting notes. So instead of A major 7, you can even try an F sharp major 7. So F sharp major, F sharp major 7. You can do a lot of things. So have a go with just different combinations and see maybe what kind of chords are your favorite. That's all for today. I'll see you soon. All right, welcome back everyone to this lesson. And here I'm going to be teaching you how to use the pedal and how much of an improvement it makes to your playing and how nice it is to listen to. This is a very simple thing, but it does take some time to get good with it. So when I say pedal, I'm referring specifically to a sustain pedal. Now, if you're on an acoustic piano, you will either have 2 or 3 pedals, more commonly 3 pedals. The sustain pedal is the one on the furthest right, and that's no matter if you have 2 or 3 pedals. Now, if you have a portable keyboard like this one, in the back of the keyboard, you'll find a large jack plug that will take in a pedal, and the label will be pedal or sustain. Sometimes you're given the pedal with the keyboard, and sometimes you have to buy it separately. Now, if you have a digital piano, then you will likely have a pedal built in, which will look similar to an acoustic pedal. In all cases,